All right, let's get started. Today is March 31st. We'll see how long it goes. I might be able to get this done in an hour. Either way, it's fine. Everyone should have gotten an email from me, but if you don't look at your emails often, all right, don't ask me why, but in class, that currency converter, I handed out copies to everybody. But for whatever reason, I never put it on the P drive, and I never put it in Blackboard. So somehow Eric Larson found out about it yesterday and sent me an email and said, hey, we supposed to do some currency converter program? So I looked, and it's on me. So what I said was here, this email is geared toward those of you who cannot or normally do not come to the Android and iOS classes often. I gave out a currency converter program last month for both the Android and iOS, but unfortunately did not put it on the P drive or Blackboard. It's all there now. So what you got from me too, and it's 3 megs, so if you don't want it, just get rid of it. But this is all the homework we've had this semester in the iOS class, and this is all the homework we've had this semester in the Android class. So there have been 3 assignments in each. The first one was the BMI calculator, the second one was the currency converter, and the third one are the steps for the app that you're going to create yourselves. John, I didn't send you one, I'm sorry, but if you want one, I'll be happy to send it to you. Okay. Well, that's the first thing. Second thing, I asked you this before, but I don't normally do it like this, but I'm going to anyway. Next semester, I still right now have no idea what's going on as far as, first I was told I wasn't going to teach the 157 class. Then I was told I was going to teach it. My name's on there now. My name's also on there for both sections of the JavaScript class. But I've already been told, well, if you've got too many hours, we may take one or both of those classes away from you. Okay? So that's what I'm about to tell you. That I'm prefacing it with that because it could be Denny could end up teaching something. It might not even be Denny. It could be Arinda. They could get an adjunct. I don't know. So I'm asking you, and I know I've asked you this before and people have been kind of, but what do you think of, by and large, what do you think of the Muroc books? Now, I wish this semester, see, John will tell you that last year for the Android class, I used the Muroc book. I grabbed a book this semester which gave you everything there was about Android and everything there was about iOS. The problem is there's no way in hell there's enough time to cover all that stuff. That's the good and bad news of the book we have. The bad news of the Muroc book for Android from last year, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but the first half of the book was all on the tip calculator. They kept refining it and adding this and adding this and adding this. Then they started with new apps. And I didn't like that, which is the main reason that I changed. All right? But I'm thinking for the 152, 157, which is the website development XML, it's the HTML5, CSS3 class, and the JavaScript class, using Muroc books for both of them. All right? And, I mean, now you're all pros, whether you realize it or not. So I can't say, hey, if you were taking those classes and you had no experience, what would you think? All right? But that's what I'm thinking of doing right now. In fact, one of the reasons that I've been so nice to them is I'm in contact with Mike Muroc, and I didn't even know whether to tell you this or not. It probably won't happen. But he's looking for somebody to author a Swift book for them. And we've begun conversations. Now, it may never happen, all right? Or it may happen. I know how much he wants me because he said, hi, Scott. And anytime people can't pronounce, can't say my first name, they have to say my last name, I know they really are interested, all right? So we'll see, all right? I also wanted to tell you this. I have not, what I'm about to show you this on here right now, I have not looked at a bit. There is a product out there that's called 88mobileapp.com. All right, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Supposedly, they, and I haven't done anything with it except I signed up for their mailing list, so I've gotten a bunch of things from them. But supposedly, it's a lot of drag and drop-ish types of stuff. And they claim that you can create most apps in 5 or 10 minutes. All right, so I don't know if it's any good or if it stinks. All right, and there's another product that I looked at. I won't be able to find the email now, and I was going to send it to you before break, but I forgot to. It's called, I think it's like B4U Android or B Android or something. But what they've done is instead of basing Android off of Java, they're basing it off of BASIC, not Visual Basic. Basic. And it just looked intriguing when I saw the article. All right. And they have like a free 30-day thing where you can go and download it. Like I said, I'll look it up. I'm sure I'm giving you the wrong name. It's like B4U Android or something like that. B4U Android app. I don't think that's probably it. No. These aren't them. But it was something with B in it. And Android. It's like B Android. It's something like that, but I don't remember what. I'll try to look for it during the break, and if I find it, I'll show you what it is. All right? The other things I want to mention to you very quickly, as always, I've created a folder out there on the P drive. And if you go out to that folder, I just wanted to show you what is in it, in the in-class folder. And then you can figure out whether or not you want to actually want to go and download it or not. All right? So what's in here, there's this. The first thing that's in here are a couple URLs. Core Data Save Images Grocery App Xcode 7 tutorial. I've been watching a bunch of stuff online, and I started watching this. One of the more intriguing things that I saw was this. This guy builds a grocery store app using core data. Well, I started watching it, but it's an hour and 25 minutes long. So I watched about the first 5 minutes, and it seemed like the guy really knew what he was talking about. All right. Plus, I do look at the likes and dislikes, and out of 50 people, 49 liked it. Now, maybe it's him going out there 50 times. I don't know, but I don't think so. All right. So I showed you that. I'm going to leave the page. All right. And tell you the rest of the stuff that's in there. All right. This core data is the same one that's in the book. I did it. So if you look at it, and you don't have to bring it up or anything now, but if you look at it, keep this file in the editor. No. Why is it showing me that? Let's see. What I've done is I went through what the author had in the book, and I put comments all over the place. So hopefully you can understand what's going on. That's the good news. The bad news is, and that's why I was trying to fix it right now, and then I got a problem with the machine, for whatever reason. I've keyed in a bunch of the programs that are in this book this semester, and by and large, I've had no problems with them. Until this one, because I keyed it in, I ran it, and it shows me absolutely no interface. In other words, I get the simulator with nothing in it. All right, so I'm doing something wrong because when I brought up the authors, it worked just fine. All right, but I don't like to just do that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to talk about this in just a minute, and I'm going to leave mine up here because I did go back and double check, and it's the same code the author has in the book, but I've got the comments on here, which is why I want to go back over that. All right, but if you didn't like that, the one that says Core Data Demo, that is the authors. All right, that is the authors. All right, I've got a bunch of stuff out here called Core Data Tutorials, and it's broken up into 3 sections. The first, this is called James on, I don't know if that's Quav. How do you pronounce that? I don't know, but that's the actual site. And this guy had a 4-part series on core data in Swift. Okay? I looked at it, not in a lot of detail. Toots Plus had a 4-part series on core data. So I copied that. And then Ray Wenderlich. This is the one I'm going to go over, not just what's in the book, but I'm going to go over this one also. Getting started with core data. We're going to go over that one in just a minute. All right? And if you look up on my screen here, what you'll notice is what I have here is That's the Ray Wenderlich article, and it's pretty good. I've gone over that one a couple times. All right, and there's a part 1 and there's a part 2. Okay? Now, the other thing that's here, and again, you have all these URLs if you copied that folder over. This is developer.apple.com. This is their stuff on Core Data, all the stuff that you see right here. And if I go over to where it says Core Data Stack, that's pretty much the same picture that's in your book on the bottom of page 335. All right? So I'm going to go kind of back and forth between a couple of these things as we go through this. So, again, like I said, there's the picture that's in your book, and there's the other one. So if I'd have to open up another browser and then split the screen. I don't feel like doing that, but you get the idea, okay? So I'm going to go over chapters 47 and 48 right now, talk about the app that they build, and then go over a little bit of the Wenderlich app and why I think it would be worth your while to at least take a look at it. Okay? All right. You may or may not have noticed, but at 1 o'clock today, I had the headphones on. I wasn't watching a class. I wasn't doing anything, but there's a guy, he's got a bunch of courses online, and he had a webinar on building your first iOS app. You might say, well, geez, you should have shown it to all of us. Guess what he built? Yes, it was a tip calculator. All right. So I was really going and doing a lot of things while he was going through that. But he did mention a couple things that, and different ways of doing things that I didn't know about. So I'll try to throw those at you too. But the stuff that he's got like 5 courses. They're $199 a piece. So do the math. That's basically $1,000. All right. Or what, $975? No, $995. Then he's got another thing where he gives you access to his older course, which was for iOS 8, and that's $299. Then he's got something else that he provides that's $199. The whole thing was about $1,500. But since we watched the webinar today, we could type in our own code and get it all for the low price of $497. Thanks, but no thanks. All right. But the guy seemed to really know his stuff. And I'll show you his information that's out there too. There is so much junk out there. All right. I don't know if I ever told you this. Last thing I promised to say, then we're going to go into this because it's short. But for a year, I worked for Woodward Governor. All right. And I actually interned there when I was teaching at Mid-State Technical College. And there was a guy who worked there because they had a Woodward Governor at that time in Stevens Point. His name is Colin Fox. Really nice guy. Really intelligent guy. And I asked him once, what do you do? And he explained to me what his job was. He was some programming, some analyst work. But what they had done is they looked, and in 4 years, he had literally gone to so many classes that he was gone almost a year out of those 4 years. I don't know about you, but I think that's a hell of a long time to be gone. And the thing was, he wasn't bringing back a whole bunch of stuff. And the reason I'm telling you that is there's so frigging much online. And not only that, not everybody does everything the same way. So you can watch a really good webinar or video, and somebody says, do it like this. Then you can watch another one. They'll go, oh, no, don't ever do it like this. Do it like this. And I'm finding the more I watch, the more of that stuff I see. All right? But if you are interested in this guy, what was it called? Easy Apps? Fast Apps? I don't remember. I'll have to get it. I've got it in here someplace. All right? So I'll have to show you that too. So what they talk about in chapter 47 is just the stack. That's almost the entire thing on the chapter. Take a look at what's here. At the top is your app. At the bottom is the actual database data. And what they're showing you here is there's a bunch of different layers that you have to go through in order to do this. The good news is that virtually the only thing you'll ever have to touch is this, managed object context, which is part of the managed object model, but you won't have to touch the persistent store coordinator or object store, although it is possible to do so. And I was reading this article last night. In fact, it was one of those tutorials that I mentioned that's on tootsplus.com that I put out there for you. And the person who wrote it professes to be pretty much an expert in this. And he said the biggest problem that people have with it is they jump in and they start creating apps before they actually understand the underlying architecture. All right? And I thought, well, here, because I think that's kind of what we do a lot in here. Because if we talk about the architecture and we talk about how to do something, there's not enough time for you to do something. All right? But they talk in here about the different stuff that's in here. All right? And you'll notice at the top they talk about managed objects. And notice what it says in here. Basically, what a managed object is it's a record that you put into a database. Core data is not a database, but you use it as though it's a database. All right? It's done totally differently than the SQLite stuff that we looked at the other day. All right? But it's not a database, but it's like one. So what they're saying is a managed object is like a row in a relational database table. All right? And you don't even see managed objects here because managed objects is actually the combination of both managed object context and managed object model. All right? So they explain what all the different stuff in here is. All right? And it says core data never interact directly with the persistent store. In other words, it is creating. Okay, remember the other day we talked about wrappers? And we even looked at that FMDB database wrapper. Guess what? Core data is another wrapper around SQLite. So what's happening underneath the hood, so to speak, is that still SQLite stuff is being done. But a lot of the people who work on this stuff don't have a great knowledge of databases. So they created this as more or less a GUI type of tool for you to use. So if you don't understand the complexities of databases, you don't have to. All right. So that's the manage object content rather. That's basically how you communicate. Your program communicates with the equivalent of what's a database. All right. Then you've got the managed object model. And as it says right here, remember, I've talked to you a couple times, but we haven't really looked at it in much detail at all. But I talked about the fact that many of the people on our advisory committee that hire programmers are now interested in them understanding what's called MVC, or Model View Controller. And I mentioned the model basically is the data. The view is what it looks like. All right. So, for instance, on that package, that thing that we did the other day, the view were those 3 labels and text boxes. It said name, address, and phone, the label underneath it that said record saved or whatever, and the 2 buttons. That's the view. The controller is the Swift code that we put in so that when you click the save button, it attempted to save it for you. Or when you clicked the find button and you put in information, it attempted to find that information. All right? The other thing that's in there is the model. And really, what the managed object model in here is it's the model of the model view controller. They create it as what they call entities. And when you look at some of the stuff that's in here, they talk about entities can have relationships. Sound familiar? I know you've done one-to-one relationships in databases before. You've done one-to-many database relationships before, and you were probably told by me, Denny, or someone else that really relational database management systems do not do a good job of handling many-to-many relationships. So instead, that's when you have that join table. All right? Well, they're talking about relationships here as well. Notice that unlike the other ones, you can have a one-to-one or a one-to-many, but core data also allows you to have a many-to-many relationship. That's legal in there. All right? You can work with fetched properties, and you can do those, if you work with fetched properties, you can do those in lieu of having relationships. But what they are basically a wrapper that's put around relationships. All right? Then you can also, instead of doing like an exec query or something like that, you do what's called a fetch request when you're in core data. You don't execute a query because it's not a database. You do a fetch. Okay? All right. So they talk about the persistent store coordinator. Again, the idea is, even though it is a database, they don't like to use the word database with core data. So the persistent store coordinator is responsible for coordinating access to however many of these entities you set up. All right. The environment that you store data in is called a persistent object store. And what happens when you go in and you create this, and we talked about this before, if you go in, and that's why I wish this machine worked, but it doesn't, but if you've got your Mac and you go in and you create a brand new project, and I don't care what you call it, but if you do, and if you click the button at the bottom that says core data that we've never clicked before, you get a special file that gets created, which is the same thing as the name of your project, but it's got a big extension on the end of it. All right? And that big extension that's on the end of it is XC data model ID. And if you double click that file, this comes up. It looks pretty benign. There's not much in it. But this is where you could basically set up any table you want. You can set up relationships between tables, etc. So what they have you do in here is they have you click the button down here that says Add Entity. And as soon as you do that, up here, it comes in and it says Entity. Well, that's probably not going to be the name that you're going to want for your table, so you double click on that. For instance, in here, they have you double click on it and call it Contacts. Okay? So now you got a table that's called Contacts that has in it absolutely nothing. All right? So then after you do that, you come over to here and you click Add Attribute. It's grayed out now, but as soon as you have a table, it'll be on gray. And then you put in the names of your fields. Okay? So what they do is they have you come in here and put in name and address and phone. And as soon as you put names in there, then this blues out because you have to give it a type. So they have you put in name, which is a string. Okay? They have you put in address, which is a string. And they have you put in phone, which is a string. When you use this, technically, you don't have to use IDs. It's not technically a database. So you go, well, how do you search for things? We're going to get to that in just a minute. All right? But that's what they have you doing here. So you're in essence, you're creating a new table with 3 fields in it, all of type string. Okay? So if you follow their steps up till that point, that's what they're telling you to do in here. All right? And it says when you do that, basically what it's going to do is it's going to build for you something that looks like this. Don't worry about the other part because that would mean you'd have to build another table. But if you build that, which is what they build in the next chapter, that's what you get. You get something that's called in contacts, and it's got an address, a name, and a phone number. The order in which you put those in doesn't matter. All right? But if you decide that you're going to put in another table, for instance, here they put in another table. If you do that and you have a field in common, you already know this, you can set up relationships between those. For instance, a one-to-many relationship. They don't even go to that extent in the book here. They just use a single table. So just pretend this one right there is not even here. Because all they do in here is they go through and set up this one. That's it. All right? Then they go through, for the rest of the chapter here, starting on section 47.8, which is on the bottom of page, or middle of page, 338, is the author says, okay, now when you write these, here's how you have to, for lack of better words, hook everything up. All right? Notice, since many of the core data methods require that managed object that we looked at, managed object context a second ago, that's setting it up right there. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you something, and again, it doesn't mean as much because you're not seeing it on a Mac. But if we look in here, and we bring up, I'll bring up the authors, the core demo or core data demo. So if I bring that up, all right, this is a file we haven't touched all semester. It's called app delegate. But when you put in core data, what happens is it goes in and it adds all of that stuff. All right? And why does that matter to you? Because all you have to put at the beginning of your files in order to be able to use all that stuff that's there is you have to come in here and at the beginning you have to say import core data. And if you say import core data, now all that stuff that's in there, that's in the core data library, is available to your program. All right? And again, I'm just kind of mentioning to you what the author mentions in the chapter here. So he explains this. Again, I don't know if it would help or not help to do this, but if you follow all the steps, okay, what's going to happen when you get done is actually two different files are going to get created for you. If you follow the steps the author has you follow. One is called contacts.swift. All right. Oops, where is it? So contacts.swift. And the other one is a weird name. Contacts plus core data properties.swift. All right. So if we look at contacts.swift, not too much stuff in there, I think we'd all agree. All right. And if we look at the other one, this one here, whoops. Yeah, whatever. I don't want to do that. Again, you say that doesn't look like much. Well, just so you know, when you see stuff that starts with an @ sign like that with an S, means it's Objective-C. What's happened is it's built a class for you that's going to hold all the values that you just put in to core data. All right, because what it's trying to do is it's trying to communicate. All right, it's trying to communicate, and the code is being used to communicate with a database. That's the entire model. You're modeling the data. All right. So I'm sure that the author explains it much more eloquently than I just did, but that's pretty much what's in there. Okay. And he talks about saving, and this is another thing that's going to be in here someplace that's new. When you want to save it, hopefully you'd agree with this. If I try doing that, there's a chance if I try saving something, it might not work. So some of the stuff that you do in here, okay, they don't call it a try catch. They call it a do catch because you put do and then you put the try inside of the do and then you've got a catch. You'll see that in the next chapter. All right, last thing I want to mention from this chapter is right here. Okay. This is, for lack of better words, this is the equivalent of you writing a query where you've got a where statement in it. If you don't use what's called a predicate, everything gets returned. So what if I had 1,000 records and I only wanted the people who worked in the accounting department, for example, okay? Then what I would be doing is I'd be doing something just like this, but this would say accounting. Does that make sense? So in here, we're just looking for John Smith. Now, when you look at it, this looks weird. Okay? Before I even explain it, it's very similar to what we did last semester in C. Remember when you would say something like %D or %S? That's what you're doing here. All right? But the thing about Objective-C is you need, anytime you're going to print, we're used to printing out something and just putting a backslash and putting it in parentheses. It's not how you do it in Objective-C. So here, what we're saying basically is this is a placeholder. That's exactly what it is. And what we're saying is if we don't put anything in there, we're asking for every name that's in here. But by putting this in here as another parameter, we're saying, okay, this is a placeholder, but it's a placeholder for John Smith. So it's the equivalent of show me all this information, but only show it to me where the person's name is John Smith. Does that make sense?
Kind of. Like you said, like if it was accounting, you'd have to put accounting by John Smith. Does that mean you'd have to change the name and the price?
That means that wherever it is up here, where we will set up the entity, we'll have to make sure this would look, if we just put accounting in there, it would look for a name of accounting. So it wouldn't be name in here, it would be like department.
Okay.
All right, or something like that. All right, good question. Yes?
Howdy.
Howdy.
Having issues with jfiddle.net?
Yep.
You want to show them, John? All right. So as we keep going on, just kind of keep this stuff in mind. All right? We also use this. You know, this whole thing works with a bunch of what's called key value pairs. Remember key value pairs? You know them, you love them. All right? We've been looking at them and using them basically on and off almost forever. All right? So you're going to see all this stuff in the next chapter. What they do in this chapter is they have you go in, and first they say, okay, go in and create a new project, single view, call it core data demo, and when you do, open up the core data demo.xcd data model ID file. So you get this. Same thing there that we talked about just a bit ago. That thing right there. Then they have you come in and do just what I told you. You follow the steps, and you add an address, you add a phone number, and you add a name. All right? After you do that, and you've got all that done, rather than you having to create that little class that we looked at before with the NS stuff in it that I showed you, all right, you have Xcode do it for you by following these steps. You don't have to do it that way. You could do it yourself. But what happens is when you follow the steps that are shown here in section 48.4 on pages 342 and 343, you end up having Xcode create that file for you. All right? Then you create the exact same user interface, exact same, that we used in the last chapter. All right? So let's look at the code, because that's all that's, for lack of better words, new in here. It's just a couple pages. First thing you have to do is you have to add this. Okay? In fact, let me go and I'll bring up the code because I've commented it. So, not there. All right. So the first thing that we do in here is we have to, this sets up that managed object context, and we just looked at what that was when we were over here. All right? So that's, for lack of better words, that's setting up a variable. Okay? Then this stuff that's not new to you. That's the same stuff we did in the last chapter. It's the same stuff we've been doing all semester. You control drag over from name, from address, from phone, and you create 3 outlets. Then you do another one for that label that's at the bottom. What's new is everything that's in here, which is the save, and what's in here, all right, which is the find contact. All right? Now, I'm thinking that possibly the reason that I broke my own code and I didn't get anything up, I went back in and I added this. Remember this stuff? And maybe I didn't need it, or maybe there's something in there that's hosing something up. I don't know. But they did not have that in the author's version. I went back and looked, and that's not in there. So that's on me. So I'm going to have to try to take that out and go back and take a look at it. But let's just look at these two different, the save contact and the find contact. So again, you've got your interface. So you've got here name, and a text field, and you've got address, and you've got a text field, and you've got phone, and you've got a text field. Then you've got a label down here. Then you've got 2 buttons here. One that says find. Oh, I did them backwards. One that says save, and one that says find. So the code that we're looking at on the screen right now, that's the code that's going to fire when you press this button. that make sense? So the system is expecting that you've got something in here. And all it's looking for is that there's something in there. It's not validating it at all, okay? So the idea is if I type in Jeff 123 main and a phone number and I click save, it should say record, I think it's record saved, but it's something like that. And as soon as it says record saved, like we saw in the other one, that gets removed, all of that gets out of there, all of that gets out of there, and all of that gets out of there, so you can put in another record. Okay? So I've done that. Now I come back in here and I type in Jeff. And I click find. Well, it fills in then 123 main 111-222-3333. And it says record found. It says one record found. Does that make sense? So it's going two ways, just like we looked at the other day when we looked at it with SQLite. All right? So if you press save, it wants to be sure that there's something in each one of these fields, but it's not validating the type. I could put 100, 100, and 100, and it would think that's just fine. All right? So we have to put a lot more code in order to actually do some validation in here. All right? Plus, if I had more than one Jeff, it's going to show me here. It's only going to show me the first one here, but it's going to count and show me how many Jeffs are actually in the database. Okay? And so again, the save, okay, will grab stuff that we put in here and put it into core data. The find will grab it from core data and bring it out here. Okay? As of right now, we don't really even have a way to delete stuff the way that this is stuck in here. Okay? But we can go in and we can add new things, we can bring it up, and I believe when we bring it up, we can make changes. So if I spell Jeff, maybe I want it to be Jeffrey.
Let override.
And yes, it would. Yeah, if I press save, it should override what's in there. All right? So if we look at the code that's here, it's pretty much what I just told you. Again, you have to set up this managed object context. Then you have to use that context to create, this is literally creating a new instance of a context object. That's going into that file that we looked at, basically, that's in there before, and it's setting up, and it says, oh, in there you've got a name, and you've got an address, and you've got a phone number. All right? And once it does that, then it comes in next, and it says, okay, now I want to take whatever we put into that name text field, and I want to copy that over to contact.name. I want to take whatever we put in to the address and copy it into contacts. I want to take whatever we put into phone and copy it into context. All right? But all that's doing is it's telling it what to do. It's not telling it to do it. So when we see this do statement here, this is attempting to actually save this out to the database. And remember, when we attempt to save something out to the database, it could fail. All right? And you know why stuff fails in a database. If fields are required and you leave them off, even though we're not checking for type here, you would be doing something like that in a more substantial app. All right? So if it was a number and you put letters in there, it would blow up, etc. So you try to do this. If it succeeds, it comes back and it says, I guess it wasn't record saved, it was contact saved, and it grabs everything that you see in those three text boxes and it blanks it out so you can put in another record. Okay? If for some reason it doesn't work, then what it's going to do is in here, it's going to put down the reason for the error. And that's the reason as far as Apple is concerned. That's the reason it didn't work. So it can be very cryptic as far as what goes in there. So that's the save. And to find, then we come in here and we do this. We again set up that manage object context, rather. All right. Then this is the equivalent. It says the request, that's our query, for lack of better words. All right. And what is the request? Well, the entity description, which we set up earlier up here someplace. Okay, there. context. All right? And then we come in here and we say, and you don't have to call it pred, but it's of type NS predicate. So again, Luke, as far as what you mentioned before, if we had wanted to, if we change that from name to address, then we could look up people based on address. But we'd have to change that to address and that to address. Or if we wanted to do it based on phone, we could do the same thing. Not only that, when you set up these predicates, this is a simple one. Again, we are doing the equivalent of saying in here, select everything from contacts where the name is equal to whatever name I put in right there. Does that make sense? All right, that's literally what we're telling it to do. But you can set up multiple predicates on the same line. So I could not only just check for name, I could check, I could check for other things if I wanted to. Okay. So then we come through there and we try to do that. So we're trying to execute the fetch request. That's the same thing. That's the execute query for core data. All right. And if it's true, if it worked, all right, then it found a record. There was at least one person there with that name. And if that's the case, results.count is going to be greater than 0. So if I put Jeff in there, okay, and it was in there, it's looking for a match, and it's also looking for not just a match, but it's looking right now. The case has to be the same. This morning I put it in as Jeff. I didn't realize it with a capital J. And then I looked for it with Jeff with a lowercase j, and it said not found. All right? So you'd have to do something with working with uppercase or lowercase or whatever to make sure, all right, that you were putting it in and you were being consistent. All right. So as it says, matching objects, it puts all of them into an array, but then we only want to see the first one. That's because that's all we have on the screen. All right. So that's what we're saying right there. Use the first one that you found as match, and then grab those key value pairs. All right, so whatever was there for name, whatever that key is for name, give us the value and put it into name.text. Whatever was there for address, which is the key, the value for it, put it into address.text. And whatever was there for phone, all right, which is the key, put it in there for phone.text. Plus, let us know how many you found. And if for some reason, so let's say instead of checking for Jeff or Jeffrey, I checked for Scott, there would be no match. So it's going to come in there and say no match found. Remember, when it says no match found here, or up here, where it says, I guess we just have an error because you were just trying to do that. But if here, if that you know this, if I do a select statement and it comes back and it says no records found, what does that mean? Based on the criteria you gave it. But it's not an error message. That would be like me if I wanted to check an employee table and I said select star from employees where salary greater than, let's say I wanted to say $50,000, but I put one too many zeros in there and no one makes $500,000. So it would come back and say no records found. That doesn't mean the query is wrong. That means there's no data that matches that query. All right? But syntactically, it's correct. All right? So that's it. And let me just real quickly go over. So again, that's the stuff in there, and you've got that for the core data. All right? This is a good article. Real quickly, give me 5 minutes. If you look at this, it's called Getting Started with Core Data. It's 23 pages long. The first 10 pages, okay, they have you come in here, and don't worry about the include tests and the UI tests. You don't need to do that. Just use core data, make sure that's checked. All right? All they have you do, the interface is unbelievably simple. What do I mean? I just want to show it to you. Literally, that's what it's going to look like. You put in a table view. That's it. The first 10 pages of this article, they have you build the app, and they don't use any core data. Did you hear that? The first 10 pages out of a 23-page article on core data doesn't use core data. Because what they want to show you is you're just using a table view here, and you can keep adding names to it. This is how they have you do it. They bring up an alert controller here, and so you put a new name in, you hit save, If you decide you don't want to save it, you just click cancel. So they put in NetStart, they click save, and now NetStart comes in here. That makes sense? Yep. But the idea is the data does not persist. All right? Now, one thing you have to realize, and again, if you read the article, or you may have seen this already yourselves, what's typically going to happen. So you come in here, okay, you come in here and you say, NetStart, let's say. You click save, boom, NetStart's right there. Now you stop the simulator. Everybody with me? You stop the simulator, you run the program again. Guess what? At least sometimes that name will be there because it caches the result. It's not there in core data. It's not there in SQLite. It caches it. All right? So they explain how you can get around that, but they show you this on the first 10 pages of this article. They have you build. The whole interface is you literally, you come in here and you set up a navigation controller, but you come in here, this is your whole screen. All right, they have you add a nav bar so you can put a title in. They have you add a bar button item, remember those? That says add right here. So when you click that, that's what comes up. All right, and there's the table view. That's everything. That's the entire interface. All right, so they have you build all of that stuff, and he goes through in here, and he explains as you're putting it in there, and don't worry about this stuff because I don't understand even the way that he did it as far as setting stuff up with auto layout. He does it a different way than I've shown you, and it's different than any other way I've ever seen, to be honest with you. Okay. But when you run through this, it says, okay, now you run the program, you set up all of your outlets, etc., and he shows you in here. Remember this stuff when we worked with table views? How you had to add this, that number of rows and section, and the other one, I don't even remember what it was called, cells for row at index path. You may or may not remember that. We did that multiplication table. All right. So all this is, it gives you a count of how many names are currently in there. All right. And this one basically is going to handle that every time you try to add something. Okay. So like I said, you come in here and you add, they say add 4 or 5 names. That's what you have. All right. Then they come through and they say, okay, now let's set it up so that we've got core data. All right. So again, the first half approximately of the article doesn't even talk about core data. But then the author goes through and again explains the name of the project is hit list. So you get a hitlist.xc data model ID. You double click on that file, you open it up, and it looks like this. That's the same thing I showed you earlier from out of the book. So you come down here and you click Add Entity. As soon as you click Add Entity, all right, this is going to say Entity. They ask you in here to double click on it and change it to the word Person. Okay? Then they have you come in and add the name and all the other fields. So when you click then on that, then you can put in a type, etc. Then they have you save it to core data. All right? And then they say, you know what, when you first did it up here and you were working with this stuff before core data, so the earlier stuff up here, you call this names. And then the author says, you know what, names is not a good name. No pun intended. And the reason, I guess I went past it, but the reason in there that names for this is not a good name, right now there's only one field in it, name. Well, what if later you wanted to put in address, city, state, zip, phone number? Names is not a good name. So the author has you come in and change the name of it from names to people, or person, I guess. All right. Then he explains in here what all of these different things are. This is what I tried explaining to you earlier. So an entity, and again, remember that, add entity. So that entity, as the author says, it corresponds to a table. All right. An attribute is each piece of data that's going into it. All right, to a table. And the relationships are the relationships if you've got multiple tables. And he keeps saying, boy, this sounds a lot like object-oriented stuff. And it pretty much is. All right. Then he goes through, and all he does is he adds the stuff so that the program will now persist. So in other words, then he says, oh, wow, we did all this, we walked away, and it's empty. And the reason it's empty is he has you build it incrementally. So he has you build all of it, but he never had you do that fetch request, which is what actually brings the data in. So then in the end, he has you bring in the data. All right, that's it. And the where to go from here, again, that second article is much more complex. It assumes you've gone through the first one and that you have an understanding of what core data is. All right, so that was quick, sorry. And I'm looking at it, I'm thinking this. We have 7 more weeks left, okay, after this week. I've done the math. We have 7 weeks. And I thought, well, okay, I have no idea with what I'm going to tell you right now how this is going to work. But what I'm planning on doing is I thought, okay, what do I want to cover with you that I think you'd enjoy, you'd get something out of, etc. I came up with 3 things. So think about this week, and if you disagree with what I came up with, you'll have to let me know real quick. Or if there's something I'm not going over, you'll have to let me know real quick. But I thought of 3 things for both classes: animation, audio video, and having us write a game. And I thought hopefully that'll get, so we will have gone through most of the stuff. So we're going to do the same type of animation for both programs. All right, so you can see the similarities and differences between iOS and iPhone. I've already started doing a little bit of work with audio video, so we're probably going to do that one first. And we can take our time because we can do it Tuesday. Whatever we don't finish, we'll finish the next Tuesday. I hate that we always seem like we're rushing through everything. So I'll plan on having this take us 2 class periods to go through an audio video example. All right, then the next 2 periods will probably go over an animation example. Then the next 2 periods we'll go over and we'll build a game. All right, and it won't be, you know, it's going to be more like Pong than it will be like asteroids, for example, if you get the idea. All right, it might even be tic-tac-toe. I don't know. All right, but I like to try to build it on my own and then go out and see if there's something that's out there that's similar to that. That's probably somebody else has done much better than I have. All right, so that's what we'll do for the next 6 weeks, and then it'll give us 1 week left. That last week, that Tuesday, like I already said, I'd like you to try to present, those of you who are here, what you did for your project. That'll also give you 5 minutes or 10 minutes here to get you ready for Thursday when you're going to present in front of other people. All that makes sense? All right, that's all I had.